SBS REEFER 250, episode 26. We've had the update on the DT, now it's time for the update in the sump, and it's pretty rinky dinky. Right, so we'll start at the very basics of having a marine tank in terms of filtration. Rock, in this time setting this tank up, I used like very few pieces. There's probably 5 pieces in there altogether, I think. But those pieces I've been using now are real reef rock, generation 3, I think, possibly generation 2. I think they're on generation 4 now. But that stuff's 3 years old, and I've got some true live rock, or fairly live rock. That's 6 or 7 years old, I think. I've got I think 2 pieces of that stuff in there. I have a lot more live rock, but it's basically sat in the garden being good for nothing. So that's my live rock. I also have 2 of the largest pieces, 8x4 of the Marine Pure. They've also been going for 2 years now. So I rely quite a bit on biomedia sort of live rock in that sense of things. I've not gone too mental on that stuff really, I suppose. The Marine Pure stuff may well have not even gone in this tank. I just thought it makes a good shelf for my reactor that can be submerged. It can also run dry outside of the sump if you've got the space or whatever. Looking back on opening this tank, setting this tank up, I probably could have gone with setting that up, maybe hard plumbing it and setting the reactor up outside of the sump, not bothering with the skimmer, and going miracle mud and a refugium. Let me just let the dogs out. As the rock and stuff, I also have a ton of sponge growth. Some of that came over from the previous house on the rock, still a very minimal amount, and it does die quite easily. For me it does anyway, but right now in this tank, once you keep everything stable for long enough and all the rest of it, it grows real well, and I'm pretty sure that's a really good filter. I also know, I'm pretty sure sponge is good for silicates in the water, so some people have a real problem with silicates, which I did towards the beginning of this tank. I'm sure I referenced that in the Triton test that I got back, that my silica level was fucking high. I don't know what it is now. I'm going to do another Triton test. I don't know whether I'm going to bother doing it before Christmas now, because I'm expecting that I won't get it back for ages anyway. So I might just, I don't know, might send it off in January. Anyway, going off track again. The main point of filtration for this tank has been the ALR1 algae light reactor, which is this thing right here. It's a big glow stick. Without that, I would have had to really rely on water changes 100%, because you already know by now I don't rate bubble magnets, whatever you want to call them, the curved skimmers. A lot of people are going to cry about that if you don't rate the skimmer they've got or whatever. It'd be the equivalent of me saying I don't rate Royal Exclusive or Deltec or Vertex. I've never had any of those, so but it's the equivalent of saying, oh, I don't rate them, and then everyone shits their ass and has a fit at you. I don't reckon much to Bubble Magus skimmers, just because I think they're a good introductory skimmer into, like, I guess what you call proper professional skimmers or whatever. I think they're a good introductory skimmer for that, but inevitably you're probably gonna tire out with it and want to upgrade. It's easy enough to go on eBay or whatever it is and type in skimmers and just see the sheer quantity of the Bubble Mega skimmers come up in comparison to other decent skimmers. As far as skimmers go, if I were to go back and start again with skimmers, I'd probably look at more Naos or Vertex or something like that. So the algae light reactor has carried me through this tank 100%. I've got one massive problem with it though, which I'm going to show you in a sec. Which for any of you that are either buying it or have it now and haven't run into it, I really keep an eye on this because it's seriously caused a problem. You can't really see from here, but only the middle section is full of algae. There'll be a little bit in the bottom and the top, fair enough. But if I show you, I'll show you in a sec what the flow's gone like in the last week. And, well, you'll see what I'm talking about then. So, I really do rate it, but that one downside's a real big downside. Unless you sort of take the thing apart every week, which isn't a problem, and clean that particular bit out, then you'll be fine. But you do need to keep on top of this particular problem. I don't know whether I'd bother getting one for the big tank, the big system, when that next year or whatever, when it happens, when that gets going. I don't think I'm going to touch. I might go with a Pax Bellum and still do the algae light reactors, or sorry, the algae reactors. But I think if I had the space, I'm probably always going to choose an actual refugium. Like I think the pros of having an actual refugium are always going to outweigh an algae light reactor. But if you haven't got the space, they are the dog's bollocks. They're worth the money. You know, to be honest with you, you could do this. It's basically done it without the skimmer, because I mean, it's not. You can see now the skimmer's not actually on. I've just left it about 3 weeks ago, maybe a bit more. It decided today I'm going to work. I'm not just going to work. I'm going to work overtime, and it dumped all the shit out of the skimmer cup straight back into the tank. So I've took the head off and cleaned that and just left that, and I've been asked to set it back up. I do run a maintenance dose of 2 ml over a 24-hour period of no-pox. I've done that because of the on-off factor of the skimmer, so just to create a bit of a buffer between complete disaster and we're okay, so it just keeps us sort of in a bit of a comfortable area. I think it seems to keep me rounded off. Like if anything went a bit more chaotic, I might rely on no-pox a little bit more. I'm more likely to do a bit of a water change or phosphate remover, granular phosphate remover. So I do use that too. I'd say I use carbon and phos remover the same amount. I change it out at the same time about once a month. I'll put in about 50 grams of each. It's quite a small amount really. I don't use a lot whatsoever. Besides that, I mean, that really is, as far as my filtration goes, it's quite minimal. To be honest, I haven't got a massive, I wouldn't say I've got a huge bio load. I mean, I've got one sort of true predator in there, in the marine betta. I've got the tang, which is probably going to be the dominant section of bio load in the tank, however you want to put it. I've got Miguel, the Selfin Night Blenny, or whatever the hell it was. That thing just basically shits all day, so that, actually thinking about it, that's probably the main contributor to nutrients in the tank. But you know, I've got the 2 clownfish and the 2 Royal Gramma, which I've paired off, by the way. You know, those things don't usually go too well together, especially in a smaller tank, but they are a pair, so let's hope it stays that way, and maybe one day we'll breed or something. That'll be super cool. But yeah, I mean, if any of you know, with the SPS tanks, with dominant SPS tanks, you know, people go sort of mental about nutrients, bad nutrients, you know, whatever you want to call it, but like one of the best foods, and you'll actually hear a lot of the pros say this, a lot of the people that have done it a long time will have like, I'll go and get a bunch of tangs or a bunch of this, that and the other, depending on the size of your tank, blah blah blah. Basically, fish shit is one of the best foods for your SPS. So, you know, because you get these people who are like, they'll have the SPS tanks and they'll have some really nice, what should be really nice fish, and I've seen them myself, and you'll be like, the fish are so skinny and shitty looking. They look like they're on the verge of white spot all the time. They look freaked, stressed, and they're just hungry. They're constantly grazing on the rocks, which I suppose is, if there's any good side to not feeding your fish properly, it makes them graze constantly. But that's, you know, they will do that somewhat naturally, kind of constantly anyway, picking at stuff. So you end up saying to these people, like, what's up with your fish, man? They look fucked, drained and knackered. When's the last time you fed your fish? And I'm like, oh, 3 days ago. Fucking 3 days ago, man. This is a real thing that happens. A lot of people do it. I've heard a guy from a brother a couple of weeks back who was telling me he feeds his fish once a week. Oh, fucking hell, man. Why? You ask him why? I have to keep nutrients down. Fucking backwards bloke. You got... These same people tend to have fucking a bunch of different potions and stuff to be able to keep their corals coloured up and stuff, because there's not enough nutrients in the water for them to just sort of snack on all day anyway, so they have to rely on whatever bullshit you're putting in the tank to force, you know, coloration or growth or whatever the deal is. You just sort of say, mate, rather than living on the verge of white spot and stress all the time, and just, you know, you could have this nice looking tank with all these nice kind of corals in. You see the fish and you're just like, oh, fucking, to people who know, it looks shit. To people who don't know and they don't know what they're looking at, they're going to look at the tank, oh wow, you got a reef tank and all that. But for the people that know what a nice looking fish should look like, it instantly takes away from the tank. And in my opinion, the way that you should do it is, well, I'm sure I've mentioned it in the past, is always figure out the bullshit with your tank early on. Figure out where your little problems and pitfalls, learn how to get around them, and then start building on that once you've learned how to control, basically, and manipulate your aquarium. And one of those things is, take your selection of fish. For instance, my selection of fish, it's not a bunch, it's not like a load of fish, but you still got a couple of high bioload fish, right? Which basically means they shit a lot, okay? As long as you're feeding them. You shouldn't be thinking, oh, I don't want to feed my, I'm going to feed my fish as little as I possibly can, so that my tank's a bit cleaner, or whatever the thought process is there. I don't want no algae. Well, if that's the case, then you're not looking after your tank properly in the first place. If you can't feed your fish like once a day in some cases for some people, then you don't know how to look after an aquarium. You're not looking after it right. If you can't feed your fish a bunch, I don't have like me myself, I don't have an exact recipe. Like one day I might feed them 3 times, another day I might feed them 5 times, as well as feeding corals on top of everything else you've seen. In the previous video I've done, I bought, I think they're called reef sticks or something like that. The unboxing video I did with the blue label food, whatever it is. I bought that and I put it in regularly, very regularly. There's a tangle chew on it and stuff like that. It was probably daily I put some of these sticks in, and I bought that really to feed one hermit crab and the banded coral shrimp. I don't know a bunch of people who are going to that length, but there's not a problem with it. I've not got a bunch of algae. Touch wood. Knowing my luck now, the next episode will be like, oh fuck, I fucked it up. But anyway, you should be able to feed your fish loads, get them fat, make them some fat bastards, like let them eat what they can eat. Fish have got an incredibly high metabolism, and I think, generally speaking, their stomach's something like the size of their eye, so you don't necessarily have to feed them a load in one go. It's better to feed them several times a day in smaller quantities, and maybe give them the option to graze on things like you get nori and stuff like that, and mastic and stuff. Worth looking into that if you don't already know about that sort of stuff. One of the ideas is that if you can, I think this is quite a recent thing, if you can feed them little and often, they also use more of the nutrients in that food for themselves to grow, you know, that you're gonna just basically get a better looking fish all round, but they don't, it's gonna sound backwards, but they don't actually create as much waste. I know that sounds fucky, but that idea's a thing. If you were to feed them like once a day or whatever, and you chuck a load in there, a lot of that food's going to end up back in the tank. But as I've said before, the best food for corals is fish cack. So feeding your fish a bunch, there's no doubt, as long as you know how to look after your tank, there isn't a downside. You know, the tank will use, it will all be used. At the very end process, you might be like me and you end up with a bit of a pile of detritus in the one corner of your tank or whatever, and once a week maybe siphon that out or whatever. I've got two Nazara snails, and they burrow around in the mud all day and they love it. And I think if I didn't let the detritus build up a little bit in the one corner, they probably wouldn't be going. So I think they are known as mud snails, so they love getting in that stuff. So that's awesome. If I can see them doing their thing, then that's another thing I've got right, in my opinion. I also believe that the way I got my 24k life affiliate coral growing is the fact that I basically planted it in the spot in my tank where all the detritus accumulates. So I put it in the shittiest part of the tank, and you know, now again, touch wood, we've got really good growth, and it's actually covered the disc. These corals, for people that don't know, they tend to come on, the frags come on these little discs. He's completely covered that, and he's starting to make his way onto the rock. So anyone who might be watching this is new to the aquarium hobby, feed your fish a bunch when you start getting algae and stuff like that. If you're not already taking the right steps to looking after your tank properly, just, you know, just realise how to do, like, figure out how much phosphor remover you might need, figure out how much carbon you might need, figure out a decent skimmer, do your research, don't just look at the cheapest one. It's a mistake I made at the time. I put quite a bit of money into pumps and lighting, and then didn't put enough money into a skimmer. I mean, I only had to probably go another 50 quid, and I could have got a decent bit of kit, but I was none the wiser. This is my first BM skimmer, so whatever. Do that, you know, realise that everyone's obsessed with not doing water changes anymore, and like, granted, you don't actually have to. Like I said before, I do a very minimal amount. Mainly my water changes is probably more to get those trace elements back up in the water. I do use them to take, I have used them anyway to take, you know, lower phosphates, mainly phosphates. I'm not asked about nitrates. But all it is a minute ago when I said I siphon the detritus and stuff out, I just make a little water change out of that. But yeah, what I was going to say is, realise that water changes aren't your enemy. For fuck's sake, I've met some people now that are that enthralled in the no water change bullshit that they've spent $1,000 on a tank, another $1,000 on some lighting, and another $1,000 on filtration and all the other bits and pieces. So they've put some serious money into it, and then they've not put any kind of money into the idea of a water change. And then when they get going, they're so determined not to play around with the idea of a water change that there's one kind of chemical they've got to add. Now they're looking at like things like no-poxidon, looking at other forms of carbon dosing. They're looking at different sort of mystery chemicals that all these different companies come out with. It's too much effort. A lot of people seem to have forgotten how easy it is to get rid of some nitrates rather than putting a bunch of different stuff in your tank. When you go and do a water change, buy a bucket of salt for 40 quid. Go and buy an empty bucket or two for another £5. It's not a lot really. you know, you don't get one water change out of a 25 kilogram bucket of salt. You'll get a bunch, depending on what size your tank is. This size tank, I get a, you know, it lasts me a while. It's not like a, you know, I'm going off topic. Let me show you this deal with this ALR1. I'll give you my final verdict of it. I do think they are brilliant. With the big system I'm doing, I don't know whether I'm going to touch that. Not because it's bad, just because personally, if I can do a refugium, I'll do a refugium. There's just more benefits in my opinion, and they look cool. You know, first thing I'll do is I'll show you how bad the flow actually is. Remember, this is in a week. Right, okay, so sorry about the blue lighting. This is the outlet to the RedSea REEFER series. My ALR1 comes straight off my main pump and then feeds straight into this. Just after I clean it out, it gets this 3,000 litres an hour. By the time it gets into the tank with head pressure and all that, it's probably more like 2.2, 2.5 or something like that. But I just want to show you real quick, in a week, with my ALR1 reactor, algae light reactor, what it does to the flow, and then I'll show you why it does this to the flow. Bear in mind that's full pelt. Okay? One reason why this is real bad is it can affect heat. So I'm going to turn this off and I'm going to show you why that happens. So I've switched it off. It takes a minute or two for it to completely drain down. Obviously the flow's coming back through the tank and dropping down through here. Gravity's taking it down, so I'll give it a sec to settle out and then I'll take it apart and show you what I'm talking about. Just for the record, I wouldn't actually suggest, if you go into setting one of these up, I wouldn't suggest you set it up as a single loop straight from your return straight into the reactor and then straight into the tank. I'd create a manifold or something and do it that way, because that stops things like this happening. Try and keep that wire out of the way. You don't ever want to get that wet. Undo your little screws. For this reactor you don't actually have to undo the thumb screws all the way because it just twists off. Like that. Can you see the problem yet? If you look in there, so that's the outlet to this reactor. That is what stops the flow. Can't take, as far as I'm aware, you can't take that apart. I tried cranking it off the other week and I started hearing a bit of a crack, so I just left it. And because this angle's on top of here, getting a pipe cleaner down there is actually quite hard because the problem's inside this box. This is all clear. So that's a massive pitfall with this reactor. You can try and pick it all out, but it's quite difficult to get everything out of the actual inside of there. And I think I've just got a sort of stinging sensation in my thumb. Soldier on. Right, so I've got as much as I can out of there. There's a lot of coralline algae growing in there too. Yeah, so another downside is as soon as I turn this on, it's going to blast straight into the tank, most likely. The little bits that are left in there. If anyone knows that you can take that apart and I just don't realise how or whatever, can you please let me know? You know, if the company who makes this have got any tips or whatever, can you let me know if you happen to watch or whatever. But yeah, I've tried, you know, I'm pretty sure that's just all fixed in there. Yeah, I'm going to clean the rest of this out, show you what the flow's like fixed, and then call it a day, alright? That's all I'm harvesting off this. Never completely gut your harvest, always leave a little bit on there to carry everything back going. Alright, everything's back in. Let's have a look at the flow. A lot better. The tank's going mental now because there's all kinds of stuff flying around in there. Happy birthday, Lucas. Happy birthday, Lucas. Thanks for watching my video. Please like, comment and subscribe. If there's any parts in the video where I didn't make a fucking lick of sense, or if you've got more questions, please put them in the comment section down below. Hit the notifications bell if you want to actually follow the progress of this RedSea REEFER SPS dominated build. Thanks for watching. Keep it wet.